With more than a dozen new faces headed to Washington, I brought in some friends to help me recap the wild week 1 of free agency. That and more coming up on today's episode of Locked On Commanders.
Your daily podcast on the Washington Commanders. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Welcome into this episode of Locked On Commanders, your daily podcast covering the Washington Commanders, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thanks so much for making Locked On Commanders your first listen of the day every day. And don't forget that you can subscribe for free on YouTube or wherever you're getting your podcast. And you can continue this conversation with me by becoming a Locked On Commanders insider. Go to joinsubtext.com/LockedOnCommanders. And from there, you will get one-on-one conversations with me, news, text, analysis, inside information, additional information, bonus content, all kinds of fun going on. So get in on the action there. Join subtext.com/LockedOnCommanders and text me today. I'm David Harrison, credential member of the media covering the Washington Commanders for CommanderCountry.com, a part of Sports Illustrated's FanNation. And I'm here with you every Monday through Friday, along with our everydayers and everydayers. I greatly appreciate your continued support for the show. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers, you get $200 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $200 if your bet wins. Visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn to get started today. On this episode, you're going to hear from Corbin Smith, host of Locked On Seahawks, as we sat down to talk about Bobby Wagner coming to Washington. We also sat down to talk about Sam Howell going to Seattle. So if you want to hear my thoughts on his show, go to Locked On Seahawks and you can see that up on his feed. You're also going to hear from Sam Fortier on the state of the offense, but we're going to kick this episode off talking about the defense. Not only do we have free agents coming in, but we've also got players going out via trade. Quarterback Sam Howell, Candy Waller spoke to me about that yesterday. So if you haven't checked that out, make sure you do. And of course, make sure you're checking out Candy on Twitter at CWallSE, the president of Bowie TV. Candy, thanks for coming back for another segment here with me on Locked On Commanders. We're talking about our free agent recap. And so I'm going to ask you this question first, because I'm going to take Bobby Wagner off the table because we're going to talk about him specifically. But of the defensive free agents that are coming in here to the Washington Commanders, outside of Bobby, which one are you most excited about?
I was really excited about Frankie because, you know, I'm always into what are we doing at the linebacker position? Mm-hmm. What is happening? So outside of a Bobby Wagner, I saw the reaction actually by Carolina Panthers fans that seemed to be pretty disappointed that Frankie was leaving. It seems like he's just one of those players where it's almost like a chess piece. If you can have someone who can play multiple positions and keep his eye on that football, that's who you want. Extremely versatile player. Is super nice. I thought he was very kind and gracious on the call with us earlier. You know, so I was really excited about that because I felt like that was a sleeper pick. And also, I want to say, David, I felt like we've heard the coaching staff talk about their collaborative approach. I felt like this was a player that said, you know what, Adam Peters is really listening to this coaching staff. They're really listening to each other, and they are using their network and their resources to bring in who they think will fit into this scheme. So I was really excited. That was one that I was like, okay, that's pretty cool. I kind of see what you're doing here, Commanders. So that was the one that I was excited about.
Yeah, no, I'm really excited about Frankie too. And of course, he's coming over from the Carolina Panthers, not coming over by himself though. Safety Jeremy Chin is coming over with him. I talked to Mike Kay of the Charlotte Observer when both these guys came over or had reportedly agreed to their deals rather. And Mike Kay described Jeremy Chin as a seek and destroy type of player. I asked him if that fit his persona. He just very briefly said, yeah, he likes that description of himself. And I think it fits for both guys. I think Frankie Louvu could be considered a seek and destroy type of player too. So two Panthers coming over. And I know sometimes Commanders fans flinch when Panthers are coming over, but these are two good Panthers that I think you have coming over. And then of course we got edge rushers coming in. Candy, look, I did a mock offseason for the Washington Commanders. I signed two edge rushers in my mock offseason. And I actually even said, you know, that might be more, like maybe they only signed one. They signed three. Now, granted, one of mine was Daniil Hunter, who was a top shelf blue chip free agent who did not come to Washington, but they signed Dorrance Armstrong from the Dallas Cowboys. They bring in Dante Fowler from the Dallas Cowboys, and they're bringing in Cleveland Farrell from the San Francisco 49ers by way of the Las Vegas Raiders. So you look at those three guys. So we got three new edge rushers. Andre Jones Jr., KJ Henry coming back. As of right now, Casey Toohill, James Smith-Williams, still unsigned by anybody, so never say never. But when you look at this edge group that we have that we know for sure, those 5 guys, Dorrance Armstrong, Cleveland Farrell, Dante Fowler, Andre Jones Jr., KJ Henry, how set are the Commanders on the edge to you?
I think that they have, you named those 5 because I think they're not set just yet. I think that the edge rusher position was a position that everyone forgot about. That was still a huge need for the Commanders because of all of the emphasis, of course, on quarterback. The team, as we all know, they traded Montez Sweat and Chase Young. So this was going to be a need, a huge need. And I think exactly what you just listed out there, David, in those 5 right there, and signing of 3 at free agency. Okay, because there's still no doubt, no saying that they're not going to draft one either. Right. Yeah. So that is a position of dire need. And I think that the coaching staff realizes that, and they want to make sure they have the right edge rushers to kind of fall into that Joe Witt mentality he was saying about playing violently and making sure they're getting to the quarterback and get through that offensive line.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's someone that we're going to be looking at. I got mock draft Monday coming up here after the weekend, and I'm excited. I think Chop Robinson, a guy out of Penn State, is someone that you got to keep an eye on, although he may sneak into the back end of the first round, so he may not even be there in the second round for the Washington Commanders to try to take a look at. But if he's there, would be super excited to see him joining that group, because I agree with you. I think that you have some solid pieces here, but I don't think you're done. I think you still have to continue to add names there. And look, KJ and Andre, I mean, I know they're working out. They're planning on coming in ready to compete anyway. But I think you're looking at what's happening on the roster. You have to understand that your roster spot may be in jeopardy if you don't come with your A game come training camp. So expect to see those guys coming in with a fire themselves as they return in 2024. Now let's talk about the centerpiece, right? The all-pro that they bring in. We're going to talk about the other all-pro as well. Linebacker Bobby Wagner. We've been asking some of these defensive players what it's going to be like to play with him. What do you think Bobby Wagner is going to bring to this organization?
So I had to go back and pull the clip from my one-on-one with new Commanders linebackers coach, Kid Norton Jr., when I asked him what he was looking for in his linebacker core. And he laughed and he started talking about a London Fletcher type. He needs a London Fletcher type. And he started to describe what that meant to him. So once Bobby Wagner was announced, I had to smile to myself. I said, a London Fletcher type. He actually gave us an answer before we knew, because that's exactly what it is. And if from a leadership perspective, we know there's still a dire need for a leader, a strong voice. And I know I've been seeing a lot of Commanders fans talking about, well, a little lukewarm on it because, is Bobby Wagner still the same Bobby Wagner? Is it still, hey, he's still got something left in the tank, and he definitely still has something to bring from a leadership perspective to that defense. Yeah. And it's a persona, right? We would always, you and I, David, we would always talk about who's the leader. There is no question the mentality that a Bobby Wagner has and that others just follow suit when you have someone of that stature on your team overall and on your defense. So that was the one that it's been all business. We all business all week long, all the time. But I have to say that signing for sure made me smile, because I said, Coach Norton did say a Fletcher type. And I think that's what they just got.
Yep. Coach Norton returning to the NFL, and he's bringing back his best linebacker. He bringing his best linebacker with him to his new spot. So you can't hate on that. And of course, we can't leave here without talking about the other All-Pro that the Commanders added to the 2024 roster, but as a returning player, right? Jeremy Reaves, All-Pro special teams player, safety. I mean, Candy, what can you say about Revo? Let's talk about Revo here to wrap this up.
Revo is great. He's been great, not just to his teammates, but let's be clear, he's been great to the media. We know there's always a persona of players versus media versus players. It is not that vibe at all. Revo shows nothing but love to each and every single one of us. And he has that dog mentality. He wants to win. He loves his teammates. He loves what he does. And just his story overall, how can you not root for Jeremy Reaves? And he's more excited about wearing the burgundy and gold than I've seen him in years. And he's always excited. So we know things have changed. The team already looks completely different, if you ask me, than it did last year. But Revo is ready to go. And I can honestly say, I'm definitely glad that we'll have him back on the team to cover him next season.
Yeah, absolutely. Very excited to see him again and talk to him in person. Congratulate him on his new deal. Candy, before we get out of here, looking at the state of the defense when we left 2023 to where it is now, how are you feeling about what this team is doing on the defensive side of the ball?
I like what they're doing. I mean, hey, we did see that Kendall Fuller has moved on, right? He's moved on officially to the Miami Dolphins. And okay, hey, let's see what happens. Let's see if they make any more free agent moves to beef up the defense. I was pretty impressed, as you know, with the DBs in the draft class as well. So this is going to be interesting. But so far, in terms of identity and the persona that Joe Witt Jr. wants his defense to have, they are falling in line with exactly what he has described his defense will be doing in the future. Candy
Waller, president of Bowie TV, on Twitter at CWallSE. Appreciate you coming through and talking to us about the defense. Great stuff from Candy Waller there of Bowie TV. We got Sam Fortier of the Washington Post coming up next on today's episode of Locked On Commanders, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode of Locked On Commanders brought to you by Robinhood. Did you know that even if you have a 401k for retirement, you can still have an IRA? Robinhood has the only IRA that gives you a 3% boost on every dollar you contribute when you subscribe to Robinhood Gold. But get this, now through April 30th, Robinhood is even boosting every single dollar you transfer in from other retirement accounts with a 3% match. That's right, no cap on the 3% match. Robinhood Gold gets you the most for your retirement thanks to their IRA with a 3% match. This offer is only good through April 30th. Get started at Robinhood.com/boost. Subscription fees apply. And now for some legal info. Claim as of Q1 2024, validated by Radius Global Market Research. Investing involves risk, including loss. Limitations apply to IRAs and 401ks. 3% match requires Robinhood Gold for 1 year from the date of first 3% match. Must keep Robinhood IRA for 5 years. The 3% matching on transfers is subject to specific terms and conditions. Robinhood IRA available to U.S. customers in good standing. Robinhood Financial LLC, member SIPC, is a registered broker dealer. Continuing on now with today's episode of Locked On Commanders. Thanks again for making Locked On Commanders your first listen today and every day. Everydayers come back Monday. We got a brand new mock draft Monday dropping to start next week, and we got a whole new board to work with. We got new team needs. We got more picks in the first 3 rounds. It's going to be a very exciting mock draft Monday. Make sure you come back for that. As you know, Locked On has also launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel, Locked On Sports Today. Baseball fans, mark your calendars for March 20th at 7 p.m. Eastern time for the best Major League Baseball season preview coming exclusively to Locked On Sports Today. Again, March 20th, 7 p.m. Eastern. Get all your local MLB experts on Locked On Sports Today, the 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube, or for free on Amazon Fire TV channel apps. Now, let's bring in Sam Fortier of the Washington Post to talk about this new look Washington Commanders offense. Coming through now on Locked On Commanders to talk about the new offense, and it really is going to be a brand new offense here in Washington. Sam Fortier of the Washington Post. Sam, we got to start with the Sam Howell trade. Fortunately, he's the only Sam leaving DC, and they're not taking you with them. But what did you think about the Sam Howell trade? What do you think about the value they got for him? Because that's been a hot topic as well.
Yeah, the battle for the supremacy of the Sams in the Commanders is down to Sam Cosmi, Sam Fristacci in the PR department, and me. So, no, I'm just kidding. I mean, look, I think when you look at this trade, and I can get into the nerdy aspects if we really want to drill down, because I love the draft value trade charts, Jimmy Johnson, which I got a lot of thoughts on, to Fitzgerald, Spielberger, all that stuff. Basically, I think what you should take away from this is like the value of a Sam Howell trade right now is probably around a mid-5th round pick. And I know that that's lower than the Jimmy Johnson chart has it at a 3rd, and it's higher than a couple other charts which have it at a 7th. I think like I saw some tweets that were like, Adam Peters fleeced Seattle, and I don't think that's accurate. But I do think that like moving up 20-something spots for both those picks, getting into the 3rd round, like that is a significant thing. I don't want to downplay that. So the value for the Sam Howell trade is, I think, substantial, but we shouldn't overstate it.
Yeah, no, I agree completely with that. I think the leap from one day to the next, to the day before, like from day 3 to day 2, is significant as well. But like you said, there's a lot of charts for every different way to evaluate a quarterback. There's a different way to evaluate a draft pick trade. So I like that. And I know you shared a really cool article from your time in the Washington Post on Twitter. So anybody who doesn't see that, at Sam4TR, go check that out. It was really good. It is nerdy, but it's really good nerdy stuff. So Sam, let's look at the rest of this offense. Zach Ertz, obviously, is finalized. We talked to Tyler Biadasz on Friday. Austin Eckler's coming through. Nick Allegretti was the unfortunate soul who had to be on the press conference as the Sam Howell news was breaking. Marcus Mariota is coming in. Jamison Crowder's coming back. What do you think about what Dan Quinn, Adam Peters are doing with this offensive unit?
They're building a support system for the quarterback they're going to take at the top of the draft, right? Like that is the whole deal. And I think that with their draft picks, whether they use all that capital to move up, whether it's they trade down and get even more, I think that you're going to see some positions. I would expect them to take an offensive tackle somewhere in the draft. I would expect them probably to take another receiver, maybe a tight end. Free agency still has some time to play out. They could address those things in free agency as well. But I think the draft is how they want to build this thing. And so with the pieces they have so far, I wouldn't say that I'm like overwhelmed by any of them. I think Austin Eckler is going to be a good piece. I know that Cliff Kingsbury told Peter Schrager that he wants to use Austin Eckler outside. He's really excited to get him going as a pass catcher. And I would say that if you go back and watch that tape from last year, you got to acknowledge that he had an injury that was lingering that sort of slowed him down that he played through. So I would expect not necessarily that he'll be all the way back to 2022 shape. He is a guy who's 29 years old, but I think he's a dynamic piece. And obviously you have to get that offensive line right. So whether it's Allegretti at left guard, whether it's somebody else and Biotish at center, I think those guys are upgrades from what you had last year. So I think you should feel pretty good. And Zach Ertz, I mean, I think he's going to be mostly a passing game piece. They really didn't run behind him last year. Not a guy who really stood out in the run game, but I mean, he's a veteran who's savvy, who understands how to get open, who understands how to read zones. And for a young quarterback, I think that's going to be hugely helpful.
So with the first wave of free agency, quote, kind of in the books, that hasn't been a full week yet, obviously, of the new league year, but that's kind of what we're calling this. Free agency is still going to go on, like you just mentioned. So still some new additions could be coming, but the next big event that most people are going to be talking about is the NFL draft. Sam, how secure do you feel that this team is going to make a pick at number 2? I think most of us agree that if they do pick at number 2 is going to be a quarterback. But do you think there's can you put a percentage on how much you think there's a chance Adam Peters deals that pick?
I would put it like my initial ballpark reaction is like 80% that they stick and pick. I think that there is a slight chance that they trade up. And I know what people are saying, like the Bears would be crazy to move out of number 1. Like, they're not sticking with Fields, but until Justin Fields is traded, like I don't think it's completely off the table. So I would say probably 1 to 5% that they move up. And then I would say the rest of that, I'm a journalist, so I don't do math. So whatever the rest of that is they would move down. And I say that mostly because, this Vikings trade this morning is interesting. Obviously, they're going to go up. I would be surprised if Washington went all the way down to 11. But when Adam Peters says everything is on the table, I believe him. I think it's gamesmanship for sure, but it's not impossible to me that they fall in love with a McCarthy or a Penix or a Nix, and they're like, you know what, we can get that guy at 4, or we can maneuver our way around and still recoup some assets because as we've talked about, like this team has tons of holes. Again. Right. I would reiterate that I think it is extremely likely they stick and pick their top guy at 2, but I'm just saying it's not impossible to me that they would move down.
Yeah. And I agree with you. And I keep going back to this realization that, Adam Peters was on the staff when John Lynch called the Chicago Bears. Is like, hey, bro, there's a bunch of teams calling me to come get your quarterback. I'll trade back with you 1 pick, but you got to pay me to do it. And I mean, that was a masterclass in trading 1 spot down. And then, I mean, the Niners did it a couple years later with the Buccaneers. So the Bucs get Tristan Wirfs. I mean, so he's been around that staff and first year GMs, man. How much they love playing the trade game. So first year GMs, I'm like, I don't know. I don't know if Adam can resist the temptation of the trade game there. I don't know, man. I'm going a little bit crazy with it. Like 11 and 23, and then you take 11 and something else and move up to 8 with Atlanta. And maybe you get JJ McCarthy, you still have 23 and then whatever else. So it's going to be a lot of fun, bottom line. And then Sam, we're talking offense, right? But we got to talk about Jeremy Reaves. We just got done talking to him here on Friday afternoon, his press conference coming back. What do you think about Jeremy Reaves coming back and just his mentality for this team?
He's a great story, right? And everybody knows undrafted free agent, cut a bunch of times. He was originally brought in like under Bruce Allen. It's amazing to me that he survived 3 regimes. That's unheard of in the NFL, particularly for a guy of his draft stature. So look, I mean, and not only that, like the dude plays ball. He's a really good player. I think that I'm curious to see how he recovers from that injury. But he said, we talked to new special teams coach Larry Izzo, and Larry said, hey, we love who you are as a player. Don't change anything. Just show up and be Revo. And so for a guy that, was sweating it out late every August when training camp ended to get that sort of validation, to have options to go elsewhere in free agency and then choose to stay here. I mean, it's just incredibly validating.
Yeah, absolutely. Excited to see Revo back. Excited to see his excitement to be back. Sam 48, thanks for coming through, brother. For everybody out there, obviously read the Washington Post, but also on Twitter at Sam4TR. Check out all the great stuff that Sam and Nikki Javala are doing over there for the Washington Post. Appreciate you.
Of course. Thanks, Harrison.
Last but not least, we're diving into Bobby Wagner's arrival in Washington, specifically with a guy who knows him pretty well. Locked On Seahawks host Corbin Smith coming through next on today's episode of Locked On Commanders, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Say goodbye to busted brackets because FanDuel lets you bet on every game of the NCAA basketball tournament. Today's episode of Locked On Commanders brought to you by FanDuel. And whether you're betting on a big upset or a number one seed, it is time to go dancing on America's number one sportsbook. Right now, new customers, you can get $200 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. That's $200 to use on point spreads, money lines, the entire tournament, whatever you want to do. You can even pick who's going to win the entire thing. Selection Sunday is coming up, and right now the UConn men are plus 450 favorites, and the South Carolina women are minus 115 favorites to win the entire tournament in each of their respective brackets. Of course, with the start of the new league year on its way, we're going to see some fluctuation in Super Bowl 59 odds, but currently things are staying the same. 49ers are still plus 500 favorites to win the whole thing. The Chiefs have the second highest odds at plus 650, and the Washington Commanders still sit at plus 15,000 odds currently. So just go to FanDuel.com/lockedon, bet on college hoops until they cut down those nets or your NFL futures. That's FanDuel, official sports betting partner of the National Football League. Wrapping up today's Locked On Commanders and Friends episode of Locked On Commanders, here to talk about the first week of free agency. And we got to bring in Corbin Smith of Locked On Seahawks to give us the lowdown on new Commanders linebacker Bobby Wagner. Something that I don't want to say complained about, Corbin, something that we've talked about when we look at the Washington Commanders a lot is a lack of leadership, right? You get a lot of talented guys. Deron Payne is talented. John Allen is talented. Chase Young certainly had some potential. Montez Sweat was talented, but really there was no leader. There was no alpha, of the pack to kind of sit there and say, this is the direction we're going. Here's how we're going to get there. And here's why we're going to go there on the field. And we know, you talk to enough players that have played this game. Coaching stops at the sideline. As soon as you cross that thick white border onto the playing field, the coaching stops. Now it's on the player to go out there and execute, do what they need to do, be in the right position, make the play that needs to be played at the time that needs to be made. And if you have nobody steering the ship on the field, the coach can only do so much from the sideline or the booth or wherever they are with their headset on. And now what we're expecting in Washington is Bobby Wagner is going to come in, and not only is going to bring some consistent play, not only is he going to bring that all-pro pedigree, but he's going to bring leadership. And I think, to me, that is the most important thing that the Washington Commanders defense needed under Dan Quinn and Joe Witt Jr. and Ken Norton Jr. Those are the other position coaches. And that's what we're expecting. So Corbin, I mean, let me know, man, like where am I falling short? Where am I hitting the nail on the head of what we can expect from Bobby Wagner?
Bobby Wagner, and this is not a knock to some of the other amazing guys that I've gotten to cover in my 7 years as a beat reporter with the Seahawks, because there are a lot of really good dudes that I've had the privilege of being able to cover, but there is not a better man than Bobby Wagner. And we talk about the football skills. You mentioned the leadership aspect. Bobby Wagner, he is that alpha that when he steps in the locker room, he commands respect from everyone. It doesn't matter if you're offense, defense, primarily special teams, if you're a coach, an assistant coach, whoever you are. This is one of those rare guys that when he steps into a room, everybody focuses their eyes on him, and he's the one. He's not necessarily the most vocal guy, but he can be when he needs to be. He leads by example, and I think that's going to maybe be the biggest thing here for the Seahawks. Like, you've got to make sure you're getting some leaders in the locker room, because they had some issues with that a few years ago when he played at LA for a season. They really struggled without his leadership. I think that is an incredible asset for him now. And then, of course, the things he does off the field as well. This guy could be nominated for Walter Payton Man of the Year every single year because he is one of the best dudes in the NFL. The work that he does in the community back in his home state of California or up in Seattle, wherever he's at, the guy just makes a difference on and off the field. So as far as that leadership void, which has been a huge problem for the Commanders franchise for more than 2 decades, but you've got a new ownership group, you got a new coaching staff. They're really trying to turn things around. Number 54 is the guy that can make that happen with just the spark that he provides. The one thing you do have to understand, if you're a rookie on the team, particularly rookie linebackers, just don't expect him to call you by name. He's not going to do that. Your name is going to be rookie until you earn the right for Bobby Wagner to call you by name. But that is part of his leadership. And I'll tell you, it's been effective with the young linebackers they've had that he's mentored over the years.
Yeah, there's nothing wrong with that. And, we got to talk to 2 new Commanders linebackers on Thursday. Anthony Pittman coming over from the Detroit Lions. He's a young special teams guy looking to crack the defensive lineup. And then Frankie Louvu coming over from the Carolina Panthers. And both those guys, Frankie is expected to have a major role in this defense, play a lot of snaps, be an impact player on the defense. You can see the excitement in his face and his eyes, talking about getting to play next to Bobby Wagner and learn from him and work with him. And then Anthony Pittman too, just looking forward to kind of picking his brain and seeing what he can do. And for the Washington Commanders, man, I mean, Jamin Davis, first round draft pick, a few years ago, I expect that they're going to decline his 5th-year option here this offseason. So he'll be going into his 4th year in a contract year. And I really do. I see the Washington Commanders bring some guys on the field, and Jamin, you're either going to lockstep in behind him and grow from it and become a better player from it and maybe earn another contract with this franchise that drafted you, or you're going to kind of show everybody who you are. And, people say it all the time, when people show you who they are, believe it. And if you can't get with Bobby Wagner's style of play on the field, then maybe, you're not long for that organization. The question that a lot of people have, Corbin, is with his age, with his run that he's had in the NFL, the leadership, the mentality. I don't think anybody's questioning that. They're wondering how much of a linebacker are they getting once the whistle blows.
Yeah, I think that this is kind of a twofold thing. And I know Bobby would disagree with my assessment on this, but I think, at 34, it's normal. You lose a step or two. He is not the athlete that he used to be, particularly in coverage. There are some limitations. Not that you can't have him as an every down linebacker. There's some people that disagree with me about this that follow film for the Seahawks, don't agree with me on this. I still think he could be an every down linebacker. The issue is it does create some limitations for you schematically, because if you're asking him to cover a large area of grass or turf, or you're asking him to drop back 15 yards real quick and then try to cover receivers going across the middle or running backs. I mean, Antonio Gibson showed that last year in the game, Commanders versus Seahawks, when he got isolated. Now, that's a phenomenal athlete, but still, in Bobby Wagner's prime, he could take those kind of assignments. He can cover guys like that. You can't ask him to do that now. There are limitations in coverage, but as a run defender, he had 183 tackles last year. A lot of Seahawks fans point to that number and say, well, it was just because we were on the field a lot. That certainly contributed, but he was in the top 10 linebackers in the NFL in average depth of tackle, which is remarkable when you make that many stops. He had 11 tackles for loss. He was playing behind a D-line that at times got dominated, and gap integrity was an issue, and he still put up the numbers they did. I felt bad for him late in the season because it felt like at times he was one of the few guys up front that was truly given 100%, particularly in their loss to the Steelers, where he was trying to bring down Najee Harris with 6 guys pushing behind, and it just seemed like any of his teammates were willing to throw their helmets in the fray, and he almost got him down anyway. So as a run defender, a pass rusher, he is an efficient blitzer. He has been for a long time, but now that is really a big part of his game. So I look for Dan Quinn to find more ways to do that on defense where they can maximize the strengths of Bobby Wagner. You just have to understand that this is not a 28-year-old Bobby Wagner in coverage and some of the things you're asking him to do.
It's going to be interesting because, when we talked to Dan Quinn when he first got hired, I asked him specifically about the differences in his defenses from his Seattle days, going to his Atlanta days, and then his Dallas days, because there's a dramatic and noticeable shift from even fronts and to odd fronts. And I asked him about that, and he said, he's learned some things, and he kind of understood that you can't, the Legion of Boom, that method of defense used to be, the bee's knees and the way that you could stop any offense. And nowadays you got to be able to shift and go around. So it's interesting. I'm very interested to see how, Coach Quinn and Coach Witt Jr. specifically go about designing up a scheme that's going to accentuate Bobby Wagner, because we do expect him to be a big part of the organization, not just from a locker room leader standpoint, but also on the field. Even if it isn't every single down, certainly probably most of the downs, at least for a year. So looking forward to it. The deal isn't officially done yet, but as soon as it is, we'll get to talk to him. And I'll tell you, Corbin, you know how this is, man. You talk to a lot of these players, and I don't want to say you don't get excited to speak to football players anymore and NFL guys, but there are just others that take that excitement to another level. And Bobby is certainly one of those guys that's going to take my excitement to do my job that day a little bit higher.
Yeah, and I would tell you this, some advice with Bobby Wagner, make sure that you talk about books. The guy is a bookworm. He loves to learn things. Nice. And second, he is a huge Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle fan. So if you say Cowabunga dude to him, you're going to be a favorite in the media. He loves that kind of stuff. Bro, so we've gotten experience working with Bobby, and he is the best human being that I've had an opportunity to work with. Yeah. So the leadership he brings off the field is just as great as on the field, and just the effort that he puts into trying to help people with his platform. He's a phenomenal human being. And so I'm sure that the Commanders, the excitement goes beyond the fact that this guy is a future Hall of Famer, a first ballot Hall of Famer, maybe the best linebacker of his generation. I think he's still got a few good years, 2 or 3 good years left in him if he wants to play. He could be a London Fletcher type that plays into his late 30s and still can play at a high level and can play a bunch of snaps for you. So that has to be exciting for the Commanders.
Yeah, man. I'll say 2 more things before we wrap this thing up for us. First thing about the Ninja Turtles thing, I'm a big Ninja Turtles fan. In fact, Adidas has actually got a pair of Ninja Turtle shoes coming out pretty soon, and I've got alerts set on my phone so I can try to get those things when they drop. So he and I are going to get along on that front. And then the other thing is, Seahawks fans, look, if you ever come check in at Locked On Commanders to check in on your boy Bobby, please do. You're more than welcome. But I'm just going to let you understand, I did this because I used to cover the Buccaneers for this great network as well. And when Tom Brady signed with Tampa, I immediately, Corbin, started saying, Tampa Bay Buccaneers legend, Tom Brady. So be prepared. You are going to hear Washington Commanders legend, Bobby Wagner, if you come over to Locked On Commanders. It's not disrespectful to the 12s. It's not disrespectful to Seahawks. Trust me, that there is no disrespect there. But it's just how excited I am personally to see this organization get a linebacker of that caliber.
And listen, Seahawk fans, this is one of the crazier careers that we've seen for a player, because Bobby Wagner is still playing at a high level, yet this is the second time in a 3-year period the Seahawks have said goodbye. So Seahawk fans, they're familiar with this. And I think that they'll be more tolerant of Washington Commanders legend Bobby Wagner than they were with Los Angeles Rams legend Bobby Wagner. That certainly rubbed a lot of 12s the wrong way. But either way, an exciting couple days here for both these teams, the Seahawks.
All right, once again, special thank you to Candy Waller, Sam Fortier, and Corbin Smith for coming through. Coming up on Monday, we'll have a brand new mock draft Monday, new picks, new needs, all kinds of reshuffled things. It's going to be a lot of fun to hammer that out. In the meantime, if you got questions or comments, just throw them in the YouTube comment section or text me directly by becoming a Locked On Commanders Insider. Go to joinsubtext.com/LockedOnCommanders to text me today. Don't forget to check out Locked On Sports Today, the first ever 24/7 live streaming sports channel on YouTube. As always, thank you for making Locked On Commanders your first listen of the day, every day, everydayers. Thanks for coming through on a consistent basis like you do. Insiders, we will have a command huddle drop in on Saturday, so look out for that. Until we speak again, if you're out and about, please be safe, be kind, and as always, I'll see you next time for another episode of Locked On Commanders, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.